to distinguished professors and speakers, honorable guests, participants, students, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nanda, and I will be your host for today's webinar meeting. Is it our great pleasure to welcome you to Heritage Conservation Webinar Series number 1 with the theme of Management of Heritage Cities in Southeast Asia with case studies of Indonesia and Malaysia, held by Department of Architecture, Faculty of Civil Engineering and Planning, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Um, Regarding today webinar theme, I would like to start with the definition of heritage city or town uh, by Filden and Jokileto, 1998, that heritage city or town is a multifunctional organism with residential, social, political, and economic activities, and then argue that these aspects are important to consider and administer in the conservation of heritage city or town. However, in developing countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, issues on heritage has always been confronted with those of public facilities demands, such as housing, infrastructures, and sanitation. And Western concepts on heritage and urban conservation are not always relevant to social cultural context of town and cities in Southeast Asia. Therefore, the universal paradigm of heritage management could not directly apply to Asian countries due to its striking contrast. Um, therefore, today our today webinar will dive into this topic. And before we go on to our panel discussion, I would like to introduce our speakers. Uh, uh, Today for our amazing discussion panel, we have wonderful speakers, Dr. Insinyur Laretna T. Adisakti, Master of Architecture, uh, from Center of Heritage Conservation, Department of Architecture and Planning, Faculty of Engineering, Gajah Mada University. She's also Board of Directors, Badan Pelestarian Pusaka Indonesia. And our second speaker is Elizabeth Cardoza. She is an independent consultant for heritage and culture, council member of ICOMOS Malaysia Executive Board, and president of Badan Warisan Malaysia from 2015 to 2019. Our web Zoom meeting for today will be organized into first is the presentation of all this of both speakers, and then we will continue with the question and answer session. Uh, uh, to to give you more introduction on our speakers, um, Dr. Laretnate Adisakti is a lecturer and coordinator of the Center for Heritage Conservation, Department of Architecture and Planning, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Gajah Mada in Yogyakarta. Laretna received her doctorate engineering from Kyoto University, Japan in 1997, while her Master of Architecture degrees is from the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, United States, received in 1988. Currently, Sita, her nickname, facilitates as co-founder and presidium Indonesian Heritage Trust, as well as coordinator of Indonesian National Committee of Blue Shield and co-founder of the Jogja Heritage Society. She facilitates for the International Field School on Asian Heritage, Indonesian Heritage Cities Program, and also the International Field School on Borobudur Heritage Saujana. She's also director of Natural Indigo Batik Research and Design, Gallery Batik Jawa, and board of experts Sekar Jagat Batik Society. And board members, Traditional Textile Arts Society of Southeast Asia, TTASSEA. She's also a member of ICOMOS Indonesia, the Asian Academy for Heritage Management UNESCO, ICROM, um, as well as the Kerupuk Komunitas Peduli Ruang Publik Jogja, or Community of Jogja Public Space, and also an awardee of Eisenhower Fellowship. Sita, who is also a painter and flower arranger, was selected as Eisenhower Fellow in USA in 2002 and served as selection committee for Rolex Award for Enterprises in Geneva, Switzerland in 2006 and received Nikkei Asia Prizes 2009 for Culture in Tokyo, Japan, and a Practical Award 2015 from Association of Rural Planning, Tokyo, Japan. It's a very long achievement of hers. And I would like also to introduce our second speaker, uh, Ibu Liz, or Elizabeth Cardoza, is well known advocate for preservation of cultural heritage, being actively involved for over 2 decades in raising heritage awareness in both print and broadcast media channels. She actively engages in research and documentation of both tangible and intangible heritage, has worked on several master plans, conservation management plans, and impact assessments. She designs heritage site interpretation materials and provides specialist heritage guides training for cultural tourism sites throughout Malaysia. Her technical involvement in building restoration includes Stadium Merdeka in Kuala Lumpur, winner of 2010 Award of Excellence for the UNESCO Asia Pacific Heritage Awards for Cultural Heritage Conservation, and most recently, the 2019 PAM Gold Medal, medal Gold Medal Award for the conservation of Masjid Diraja Sultan Sulaiman in Klang. What a wonderful curriculum vitae of Ibu Elizabeth. And for not too overdue, please, I would like to give the time and place for Ibu Sita to start her presentation. The time is yours, Bu Sita.
Terima kasih Bu Nanda, Ibu dan Bapak sekalian. Selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning from Jogja, exactly from Sleman, not really in the city, but in the boundary of the city of Yogyakarta. I'm happy to be here to start with our program today. And I would like to share my screen. Wait a moment. Wait a moment. Okay. Sudah kelihatan?
Sudah, Bu Sita, monggo.
Okay. Yeah. So I would like to, in a brief presentation on management of heritage city in Indonesia, that actually part of this is what I try to also learn, not to just concentrate on the issue of one by one object that we previously if we talk about conservation, we mainly concentrate on this single objects. And then part of my dissertation is I try to learn more about the urban space heritage conceptions. It is try to be possible solutions to the problem of the heritage conservation planning today. And also to find a way to establish the existence of various historical local resources in dynamic urban settings amid the rapid growth of modernizations. Something that should be difference between the preservation and conservations. The difference with our single objects that is maybe more in the artifacts as well as in the heritage cities. And I believe that strengthen the positions of the local people in the comprehensively managing their respective urban space heritage will be better. And of course should be supported by multi-parties in this case. My outline of presentations. First, I just want to mention a little bit about the Indonesian people on the heritage movement. And then secondly, regarding the heritage community agreements and legal backup. And the last is about the comprehensive management that I would like to share and the needs of the multi-parties and leaderships. Oh, sorry. In the case of the Indonesian heritage movement, if we can see, go back to 90s, we can see this is what we usually say as a decade one. And then we have the decade two, 2004 to 2013, where we try to celebrate what kind of heritage that we have, the diversity of heritage in Indonesia. And then decade three, 2014 to 2023, we try to learn more and try to configure how is heritage for community welfare. In 2003, before 2003, we established what is called the Indonesian Network for Heritage Conservation in 2000s. In Indonesian language, we call it Jaringan Pelestarian Pusaka Indonesia. And then 2003, we organized the Indonesian Heritage Year, the Indonesian Charter for Heritage Conservation, 2003 launching, where we then mentioning that heritage of Indonesia is the legacy of nature, culture, and saujana, the wave of tools. And then based on our establishments of the GPPI in 2000s, as well as our launchings, the Indonesian Charter for Heritage Conservation in 2003, then we established what is called Indonesian Heritage Trust, Badan Pelestarian Pusaka Indonesia in 2004. And with this, in 2013, we established and launching the Indonesian Charter for Heritage Cities Conservation 2013. And we help also the establishment of the Indonesian Network for Heritage Cities in 2008. That's why then we also collaborate with this organization, the GPP, we call it Jaringan Kota Pusaka Indonesia, JKPI. And in 2019, we have a soft launching of Indonesian Charter for Heritage Saujana Conservations. We do hope that 2023, we will organize the Indonesian Heritage Year. And right now, this month, we call it as a Saujana month, monthly campaign about the Saujana. It says, why Saujana? Because Saujana also is an umbrella for various heritage, including the heritage city. That this month we have the discussion webinar on charters, and then on a rural Saujana, as well as the urban area, and also competition of the video on Saujana. And back to 2008, the Indonesian Heritage Trust also, as I mentioned before, helping the mayor of Solo to establish Indonesian Network for Heritage Cities. That is his initiative, where that cities being the host of the Aero Asia World Heritage Cities in October 25 to 26. And then based on this movement, the Ministry of Public Work supported this JKPI to have the program Penataan dan Pelestarian Kota Pusaka Indonesia, the Heritage City Conservation Program that launched in 2012. This program is technically facilitated the member of Indonesian Network for Heritage Cities. On that time, we also having started with 10 pilot projects, Banda Aceh, Bau-Bau, Banjarmasin, Bogor, Palembang, Karangasem, Denpasar, Sawalunto, Semarang, and Yogyakarta, where we try also to understand more and more, and especially when we organize the identifications. We are not just focused on the physical aspect, this physical heritage or tangible heritage, but we try to see more and more on the also in the natural heritage as well as the intangible heritage, and then the weaving of those various heritage. So for instance, we can see from Palembang and Banjarmasin with their own attributes that is actually part of the their significance value of those area. And in the report of the Public Works in 2018, there are also others heritage cities that already also have facilities dated by the Public Works. For instance, like Siak in Indrapura, that focus is a part of the conservations on the Muslim Malay kingdom in the Sumatra, as well as the others. So the attribute, the significance, value of each heritage city already also documented, but still long way to go on a technical aspect of what should they develop on those heritage cities. And for instance, like Yogyakarta also, Yogyakarta in 2014 launched as by the World Craft Council as the Jogja World Batik Cities. But right now, this kind of attribute also still in the slogan, but the implementations of the urban management is still limited. Secondly, in 2013, as I mentioned before, we heritage activists, the Indonesian Heritage Trust, and JKPI, Jaringan Kota Pusaka Indonesia, the Kota Pusaka Heritage Cities Networks, as well as the ICOMOS Indonesia, we launched the Indonesian Charter of the Heritage Cities Conservations, supported by several ministers, like at that moment is ministers of the social welfare, coordinator ministers, as well as from the public works. And we launched this as a heritage community agreement. We still don't have the legal backup on this. However, we try when we implemented activities, supported the local governments in managing their heritage cities. We try to develop and try to have the same understanding of the way we prepare and also make a planning, and then making the design part of the heritage cities. First of all, we have to find out also the outstanding value of each city, those significance that we're supposed to have. And one by one of these activities is actually we have to do uh, simultaneously. And our objective is for the quality of life. Not this is the usually we have a conflict in this case. A lot of city would like to have this for tourism development purposes. But in the conservations, actually, we actually propose more to the community. If the community is satisfied, they have a lot of generating income, a lot of benefit, then the tourists will come. Not like right now that we also uh, face difficulties because of the pandemic, then there are not a lot of tourism is stopped especially, and that's happened that no activities on this area. In the case of the national managements, I try to show what we have actually, like the legal aspect of the cultural protections we have. We have also the protection of the buildings by the Ministry of Public Works. We have also the protection and management of environments by the Ministry of Environment and Forestries. And we have also the culture developments by the Ministry of Culture and Development. We have the new law also on architects. But regarding the heritage city, we still don't have the legal backups. So this is also make the local governments in a municipality and also residency face difficulties when they have the to develop and prepare based on the legal aspect. In the case of academicians, we try actually some issue as trainings as well as for elective courses. In Universitas Gadjah Mada, in the Department of Architectures, we have the elective courses on a Saujana heritage, adaptive reuse of architectural heritage. This is in Indonesian language, we use the term olah desain arsitektur pusaka, and also pelestarian kota pusaka. And heritage business focusing on the design of museum. But this is still in the elective courses. However, in the studio, we also have, as a lecturers, we have right also to give or to teach what we try to focus. In my case, I focusing for the studio on adaptive reuse of architectural heritage in context of the conservations of the heritage district or heritage cities. If we come to the comprehensive management, and we need multi-parties, of course, the leaderships we can see in this case is the aspect that based on our charters, there are 8 instruments that we're supposed to develop. And the case of the institution and governance, and including the inventory and documentations, we try to develop on a historic urban landscape that adopted by UNESCO. And in this case, there is also the program of cultural mapping and finding significant values of heritage city. And in the same time, based on our law on cultural protections, there is actually the role of the mayor and or regions to has a right to execute the heritage issues. However, in the implementations we found is still limited in comparing the activities that we support to give the technical assistance for more than 50 cities. In the case of the information, educations, and promotions, they're supposed to have the updated and sustainable data. That is also the data is not just mainly sectoral, but should be uh, in a holistic approach, as well as the education materials should be available to the public, and the data should be accessible. However, only few of the cities in our that we give the technical assistance provide like a gallery planning or gallery heritage. In the case of heritage economy, we still have many problem in the case because we are not come to this issue of the economic, and mostly still see that culture and economic something difference, something that opposite. Disaster risk management also part of the requirements that when we make a plan should have prepared also the prepare for the DRR as well as the partnership with the related parties. In the case of Indonesia, we still have we don't have the legal pickup even of the single heritage. So this is we have to find out also the to proceed on this issue. And then community cultural life development. It is actually the utilization of heritage spaces based on the significant value of heritage building and city that we found in the case of the when we tried to organize and define the significant values of heritage cities. Once again, it's still limited because a lot of the cities that mainly try to focus more on the tourism development in the case of this. In the spatial planning and infrastructure, actually right now, I saw a lot of planners here. Yes, we have to have this RTRW, RTTR, RTPL. This is all about the plannings in the spatial planning. However, we feel that on those planning, mostly marginalized on heritage. The culture is there, but the heritage is still limited. We have to have more discussion actually in this case. And then the last instrument that we have to make a formula is regarding the design of the form, especially for the adaptive reuse, or if we would like to have the new buildings in the heritage district or in the heritage cities. So we propose about the olah design, arsitektur pusaka, as well as the public-private partnerships, as well as the requirements to have the heritage impact assessment. We have some discussion on this issue. However, we still focus more on the designing on the single building in this regard, not the urban and rural design of the heritage districts. I just want to focus on two instruments. One is regarding the institution and governance, that previously urban heritage movement mostly initiated by expert lover or scholars. And then once it is already on the public heritage management, so the legal aspect should be developed, local government also develop, and the legal backup. And then there will be also the demand and market and supply for how to develop the private sectors that would like also to participate in the development of the urban heritage. And the important is the role of the mayor in this case. Why this is important is this the leaderships. And I think Bunanda later on and also can mention about what is her study. In 2011, actually, at that moment, I made an interview to the mayor of Solo, Pak Jokowi, and then his idea is on the development of the heritage district should be the development based on the community development. And secondly, about the management of the product of this district itself. And should be developed, should be the activity or the program, planning program in Desian should be kroyoan. That is what he mentioned on this case. The kroyoan system is part also in the dissertation of Bunanda also, where we have to work together. All agencies should work together, public work, culture, tourism, and others, with the community to do on those heritage district sites, as well as the whole cities. And who will be the conductor? The conductor is the mayor. Learning from working together with various cities, this is actually leadership. For me, is the most important things. Without legal backup, if the leader have a leadership and pro on her heritage conservation, the city will be different. The instrument of aid is a design of the form, like what I try on a rehabilitation of Taman Sari. Of course, will be some should be remain, but there's also some change, some additionals. So this is olah desain arsitektur pusaka, adaptive reuse, should be something that develop and more. We are not going just back to the past, freeze everything, but there's a lifestyle that we have to support. For instance, like to add element like the lamp. We cannot just buy in the shop to buy the plastic or even metal. But why don't we try to develop from kasongan like this? So this is something that design should be carefully handled. And my other works, for instance, like the Maritime Museum and Pelindo also, this is the old buildings, and then we try to develop and become the museum. This is before and after. Okay, that's what I can mention on this case. Actually, still a lot of things on the heritage cities conservation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ibu Sita, for your wonderful presentation. Before we open discussion session, I would like to give the opportunity and time for Ibu Liz to present her presentation today. Ibu Liz, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibu Nanda. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Right, fine. Let me share my screen.
Yes, please.
Let me see how I do this. I'm so bad with it.
This share screen?
I just share screen and then under the share, right? Below where it says share.
Yes.
Okay, let me just go into share, and what do you see here now? Okay, I need to open my PowerPoint. Here we go.
Yes, please.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, good, right. Thank you very, very much for this invitation. I am very chuffed to be invited. Let me find my notes as well. Okay, right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I have been asked to talk a little bit about the managing heritage cities, the Malaysian, what happens in Malaysia, and I thought that I will just pick up a little bit from what Ibu Sita was talking about earlier. My focus is going to be just a little bit different. I am looking at the regulatory framework, more specifically within Malaysia, and how we manage our heritage cities and areas throughout the country. Now, Malaysia is split into West Malaysia and East Malaysia. And for a lot of this presentation will focus more on West Malaysia, and I'll explain why in a minute. But because while it is one country, the management and the way our legal system works, both Sabah and Sarawak are fairly independent at the state level, not at the federal level, but at the state level in terms of managing their heritage assets. So we will be looking a lot at what is happening on the peninsula, because a lot of what happens here is then either borrowed or absorbed or taken over in West Malaysia by Sabah and Sarawak, or not, or otherwise. So it really all depends on the context. I didn't prepare a slide on the background of the heritage movement, but perhaps I'll just go through a little, just a very brief introduction to it. In the 1980s, there was a big pressure of new development where I think politically and intellectually, Malaysia was coming into its own, and it felt very clearly that it didn't want to be linked too closely with the colonial past. You want to broker a new direction. And what happened then subsequently, of course, was that a lot of the old places became seen as passé. We don't want them. Let's get rid of them, because they are the institutions, the physical form was constructed because or within that historical period, which was something that Malaysia wanted to not engage with, or rather wanted to overturn or move forward. So the heritage movement started really in response to that, because what was happening, especially in cities and in the major cities where you found a lot of the built environment, they were being removed or changed or destroyed because it was seen as a stigma. It was a stigma. So how do you move from stigma to where we are now? In the 1990s, there became a much bigger awareness, because this whole notion of world heritage became talked about. We have such wonderful assets, so let us move into this world arena. We don't talk about a heritage law in Malaysia, we don't talk about heritage protection in Malaysia, but we are looking at a world stage. So let us put ourselves on a world platform. And how do we do that? We do that by subscribing to, the World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage Convention. This is where we want to be, and these are our aspirations. And so the country moved into that paradigm. Government was a good part of it, a big part of it, whereas civil society also saw it as an opportunity to promote the heritage paradigm. And to raise awareness therein. So a lot of work started there, but it continued to very much be limited to the physical environment, because culture was around, it was present, but it was seen as modernization was what you wanted. The new economies were what the country was aspiring toward. And our education system promoted it, and everyone promoted it. And so that was what we were chasing. So, but in the year 2000, and in the 2000s, in the first decade of the 21st century, there were a few sites in Malaysia that got inscribed on the World Heritage List. So then we start moving into a way of trying to understand how do we manage these heritage assets, because it was kind of coming in from another arena. It was coming in from an international arena, as opposed to it being a bottom-up kind of a movement, which I see, listening to Ibu Sita's presentation, was very much organic, and it stemmed from society in that sense, and from the professional cadre. And then and now we are where we are. So I will just really look more at the legislative framework, like I said, and we can try to understand what happens now within the context. I'm looking at it specifically primarily through two laws. What do we mean by heritage? Heritage has been defined in the Akta Warisan Kebangsaan, Akta 645, which is a 2005 Act, which says that a heritage site is one which has natural or cultural heritage significance. And cultural heritage significance is seen as having aesthetic, archaeological, architectural, cultural, historical, scientific, social, spiritual, linguistic, or technological value. Now, it states all of that in the beginning of the law. It's very clear that we are looking at a full and very wide range of heritage. Heritage is not limited to the physical environment. It is looked at quite comprehensively, or the Act says that it is there quite comprehensively. So it covers all aspects, which is really very good. It's not limited to just one thing. It's not just limited to the building or to the city or to the space. It encompasses, the whole landscape, both physical landscape as well as cultural, social, economic landscape and environmental landscapes, obviously. We are also looking at another set of laws, which relates specifically to the way we plan and the way we legislate for our spatial environment. So the Town and Country Planning Acts 172 and the Local Government Act 171, they are 1976 laws, and they look quite specifically at the preservation and enhancement of the character and appearance of buildings in the area of the local plan. Now, it's very important to look at that. It says buildings here, and there is a local plan. So within our planning system, we go through many layers, and I will go into that a bit later. But the buildings here are buildings with special architectural or historical interest. It reflects actually quite a lot of the idea and the notion that buildings, which are the physical embodiment of our history and our past, and that are present in our present. We try to understand them from the basis of the fact that at the same time in 1976, there was the precursor to the National Heritage Act was the Antiquities Act. And in the Antiquities Act, it was very monument oriented. It was very much the physical, archaeological, or monument orientation. So here again, you have the reinforcing, you have a special architecture or historical interest. But within the national paradigm, they also did recognize that there were particular sites and locations, not just buildings, which had architectural merit and historical interest. Now, looking at these words, architecture, architectural interest, historical interest, it really is very much, these are very much national aspirations, as you can imagine. At state level, in the 1980s and then in 2001, you have, for example, some state enactments. So some states decided, starting with Malacca and Johor, decided that they would incorporate having their own heritage legislations, which would then help them define the way in which they managed their own individual assets, which they saw as valuable. And Penang in 2011. Penang in 2011 was a direct response to their listing as a World Heritage Site. In Sabah and Sarawak, there are gazettes which also look at heritage. But in a lot of cases, the physical environment, the built heritage is very much part of it. There is some sense of the archaeological heritage, but a lot of it is linked to objects. A lot of it is linked to a singular building and the character or the characteristics of the value of that singular object, as opposed to the ensemble or the city. Within our legislative framework, we also have development control of land and buildings. So the local planning authorities have to prepare, a part of their process is the preparation of a register. And they are designated under the National Heritage Act. They could be designated a World Heritage Site, or they would have, as I said earlier, historical or architectural interest within the development planning paradigm. And within the states, you have your heritage sites, which they have identified. So you have these three levels, which I really won't, go into, because I think that it's just really, we are quite federal led. I'm not sure how how it works in Indonesia, but we have a very strong federal system that looks at a lot of things: security, education, health, etc. Then at state level, land use is a concurrent legislation. So the federal, you can create policies for what you use, your spatial use for land, but at state level, state has to agree. They have to confirm it. And at local level, they are the ones, the district officers, the town councils, the mayors, they're the ones that actually execute the planning. So you have a planning paradigm, which is very, very clear. It's very structured. And it's been around since the 1970s. And really from the 1980s, when our first structure plans came out, it is a very well embedded, very well-oiled mechanism that we have going for us. So we can protect our heritage. We can protect our heritage through our development plans. And we have local plans and special area plans that help manage change. All of this is already embedded in the system. Sounds wonderful, right? Well, we also have many, many stakeholders at the federal level, at state and local levels. And this is the first time, in a sense, we're adding in the non-government level. Because when we're looking at the laws and the legislations, it really continues to remain in the hands of the regulators, the official government regulators. And civil society, NGOs, community groups are not necessarily seen in a very positive light. You are perhaps seen as agitating. You're either pro-government or anti-government. There's no in between. There is no. So if you argue for the sake of a community, and what you're arguing for is not not as part of the national aspiration or the state or the political aspiration, then you are seen as anti. So there is a very sort of, there's a little bit of conflict and tension here between this. Heritage property owners, because we are so physical in terms of the way in which we approach this management, they have a lot to say, and legally they have a lot of rights. But the law under Act 645 is very clear. It says the minister can decide. Now, you are, as an owner, you are entitled to bantah. You are entitled to apa dia bantahan? To protest, to object, yeah, and to, or you can ask for a compensation, for example. But it is the minister's right and the right of the National Heritage Department to say, yes, we are going to we want to, this is an important architectural or historical or whatever heritage site, let us legislate, and we will gazette it under whichever act or law you want. That is the theory of it. So in summary, we have these various acts where you have a very clear way, a very clear mandate of how you manage our resources. And we have within our planning system also a very clear way of how we get together and how we gather information based on the types of principles to develop our local plans, which take in these heritage assets. And this flow chart, I must say, you know, was developed by a colleague of mine, town planner Ishak Arifin. So I must thank him also for some of the data that for this presentation that I received from him. So this is the system, yeah. And we have then come into looking at what then are our sites, what then are our, and in Malaysia we have 10 on the UNESCO or on the Geopark list, out of which we have 4 World Heritage Sites gazetted. I think they're more in Indonesia. We have some on the tentative list, and we have 1 gazetted Geopark. There are 2, and you will see that a lot of the lists on the tentative list are natural sites. And warisan budaya, the cultural sites, are I think more of a challenge where it comes to the way in which, you know, our legislations can work, because it means that you have to deal with communities, you have to deal with a natural site, you deal with forestry, you deal with environmentalists. You know, they have that big picture there. But for cultural sites, you are moving into an arena where there are people, and you have to then engage with these people, these custodians, these as stakeholders. So they usually are, you do come into, you know, certain tensions and conflicts. Some images that I have shown you, I mean, Kinabalu Park and Mulu Cave, and that site, both are natural sites, and they were gazetted, inscribed in the year 2000. Malacca, the core historic city of Malacca and Georgetown are a serial site, and they are a cultural site that was listed in 2008. And Lenggong Perak is a cultural site, but for archaeological, mainly on the basis of its archaeological finds, was listed in 2012. And these are the locations. The 2, Mulu and Kinabalu Park, are in Sabah. 1 in Sabah, 1 in Sarawak. And the others are here based in the peninsula. So what do we have? And how do we do this? We have under the National Heritage Act, we have a National Heritage Register. And this is a formal register. It goes through, the ministers assign it, it goes through Parliament, basically. And so it is a very firm and a very confirmed document. And if you look at this, while there are 93 sites listed on the National Heritage Register, 65 of them are buildings, 6 of them are monuments, which include makam. 15 of them are archaeological sites, and there are 7 natural sites. Now, so the very big emphasis is on the physical individual structure that you can see. In our register as well, we have 2 levels, yeah, the Warisan Kebangsaan, which has got the additional, it's elevated, it's like the star, the beauty queen, yeah. There are 213 sites on the register. Actually, there are a total of 300 and some odd, 308, I think, if you add the two sets together, which are on our National Heritage Register. It's Daftar Warisan Kebangsaan. And you will see again, you know, a vast majority, 60–70%, if you total them up, even 80–90% become physical individual buildings. Not so many archaeological sites, not so many natural sites. There are also within the National Heritage Department, they also have 208 other sites, the majority of which again are buildings and makam. So physical structures, yeah, monuments, which are on the tentative list and in process of being listed. So where are the cities here? That's always the question. Where are your areas? Where are your conservation areas? And at state, as I said, you know, they also have within the Acts 172 and the state enactments, they have many places. And these are all, again, apart from the natural sites, which are the forests and maybe some, you know, marine areas and some water bodies and some, you know, obviously geological, you know, your mountainous ridges, etc. On the whole, they are individual structures. So again, I go back to the question of where are the cities? So when we talk now about issues and gaps in managing our heritage cities, we really have this, we have a local plan that and a planning system that allows us to actually have a series of heritage cities if we wanted. So what has happened within that is within the local planning system, an area, a portion in a lot of the older towns that were came up, you know, historically, maybe in the last 100 years, let's say, you know, from the from the historic past until the 1930s, let's say, when they were first developed, when these towns grew up, they have quite strong, small but strong historic cores that are still present. And so within the local planning system, these older cores are recognized. And they, within the planning, the local plan, they may be seen as a historic area. They may be designated a historic area or designated a heritage precinct. But the city itself is not seen in its totality, apart from the World Heritage Site of Malacca and Georgetown. And even then, it is only a portion of the core. So there is quite, I know I use the word inconsistency, but there are inconsistencies because at a policy level, you have this aspiration of wanting, you know, and being able to, within your legislative system, be able to establish them. But at the real, how do I say, the practice level, the implementation level, as Ibu Sita was talking about, it becomes quite limited. It becomes limited because there is this question of, well, who recognizes the significance of the place? Whose responsibility is it? Is it the responsibility of government? Is it the responsibility of the community? Is the community allowed to say? Do the community feel empowered to step up to the mark and say, we want to protect our rights? Or this level of protest or you know, determination to keep their heritage is seen as too activistic. You know, there are all of these, you know, shades here. And of course, there are conflicting aspirations. We are told from our education system, we are told, I was relating the story a couple of days ago to Ibu Nanda and Ibu Sita, you know, kalau rumah papan, orang kata kita tak maju. So if we have, you know, a traditional house and that's where we live, and because we live in a rural environment and because that's part of, it's very sustainable within that tradition, do we get rid of it and build ourselves a brick house which doesn't have the kind of natural ventilation, doesn't have the spatial quality that we're used to or that fit within our whole cultural and tradition practice? So we sit outside all the time because inside is, you know, dark and hot. because it doesn't have the ventilation that we did have in a traditional timber house. We have this conflicting aspiration. You know, is it what is the understanding of maju? Yeah, and what should we be focusing on? The new economic paradigm. Where does the traditional cultural value sit in this? We focus very much on the physical and the spatial, and not the intangible, cultural or social. So you see our laws talk so much about what is there present, what we can do, what we can see, and how we manage it. And the values and the intangible values are not taken into consideration. So looking at Ibu Sita's eight aspects, yeah, her 8 principles. Number 7 was your spatial plan, your town plan. You know, that goes right up to the top. You know, our federal legislative instruments are up there, our institutional governance, and our spatial planning is very much high. But when we start looking at risk, when we start looking at culture, when we start looking at education, it has to be on a single level plane. And not a variety, not demonstrating, I think, the varied cultural landscape that is very much present in Malaysia, as it is in Indonesia. It's an extremely varied cultural landscape from our different communities. But because of the national agenda, we have this one, we work toward one level. So who manages the change? How do we protect our places? You know, the question of why and for whom. And then we have this huge issue of how cultural heritage is commodified. So towns and cities want cultural heritage. They want to retain their cultural heritage, which is their physical building, at least the shell of the physical building, not necessarily the activities, because it is seen there as a way to draw in tourists. So culture is, the use of culture, the value of culture is as its commodity in chasing the tourist dollar. So now we look then at, so where in all of this is the role of the heritage advocate in civil society? It is really a question of finding that balance. Nobody, I think there's no heritage conservation and nobody working in the field of cultural heritage that says, don't modernize, keep everything under glass, don't develop, don't change. I mean, that is absurd, you know. We wake up in the morning, we are changed, you know, every day, every minute we change, everything moves on. So there is no such thing as keeping it under glass. What is the kind of transformation that we need? The top 2 pictures that I show you is, you know, is a building that we lost, and it was replaced by the structure that you see on the right with the Twin Towers in the background. You know, the icons of Malaysia, the Twin Towers. So what have you lost in that? You know, you had a big piece of land, so you build a big hotel. That hotel, if you took the Twin Towers out of that picture, could appear anywhere in the world. So what distinctive character did it have? And at the bottom, we also have a way in which the tourist dollar is looked at. We have a mosque, a Masjid Jame in Kuala Lumpur. And it was ever present, you know, from the early 20th century, 1906. And it's now been beautified, lit brightly, and it's a wonderful photo opportunity. The mosque itself has been expanded and extended because the Karya has grown, but the treatment of it, I think, you know, then becomes a question of how do we manage that? You know, what is good, what is, but the mosque has been retained. Obviously, it hasn't been changed. The icon remains. So I end with asking this question of what is the way forward? We do need to create a national cultural heritage baseline if we are going to manage our places. And because I think a lot of you are students in listening in, you know, it's like, it's a question of, once you graduate, what role are you going to play? How important is your past, your tradition, your physical environment something, and how are you going to contribute to it? Because if you protect that, promote it, make it better, improve it. Sita was talking about the quality of life. Improve the quality of life. But what do you lose? Do you lose? How do you navigate that path? Because it is ultimately, heritage is what we want to keep for ourselves, because we believe it's important for the future. So when it comes back to heritage cities in Malaysia, we have the UNESCO groups. We have at local levels, we have many, many different places, which are precincts within a lot of old towns that have some kind of spatial protection. But the heart, yeah, the semangat, the core, the spiritual, cultural core and the tradition is missing, because that is not what is legislated for. The physical is what it's legislated for. So we have a couple of places that say, I am a Bandar Diraja because I am a royal town. So I have a certain character. Now, because we have 9 different sultanates here in currently present in Malaysia, on the peninsula, they all have, some of them are linked and, to different ones, different other states. Some of them are linked, have some kind of historical roots with what are now geopolitical boundaries, which cut them up, like Thailand and Indonesia. But some of them, they are protected insofar as you have the Sultan having his main house there, his main istana there. But does he then take that? Where does he take it? And he can protect it. But when it comes to a more commercial environment, a more commercial city, what then happens? So how do you, as future practitioners, as future professional architects, I think, and this is to address students, what would you then do, in terms of understanding your background, and how do you look at? So we work a lot with children, and I thought I would just show you, some of the mapping exercises we do with kids, because we find that if you can introduce it and you can continue to use the same children, it's a good way to it's a long and difficult road, but it's one way to ensure that there is a sense of heritage which is then incorporated into their knowledge. Sekian dan terima kasih. That's my email address, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Liz, for your remarkable presentation. So from both speakers' presentations, we learned that apparently, despite a complete development frameworks and also a long list of official government regulators in Indonesia or in Malaysia, um, our national government have not acknowledge or even see heritage cities as an entity that worth conserving and managing. And there are many actually behind the tangible aspects of heritage cities. We have many layers of intangible values that should not be taken for granted. Okay. I would like to read. We have received some questions on the chat. Thank you very much for um, Bapak Ibu who has written their responses. First of all, from Ibu, I would like to read based on the order of the question. First is from Professor Bambang Hariwibisono from Gajah Mada University to Busita. What steps do we need in order to propose and obtain legal supports for the conservation of heritage cities? He thinks that we have already the track records of the efforts that have been conducted by a number of societies or groups, which can be used as valuable foundation for more settled or and legally supported activities. So, what have been the constraints? And it would be wonderful if Bu Liz also can explain to us how the experience of Malaysia on this matter. Bu Sita,
Langsung ya.
yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, Mas Hari. Previously, we are very happy with our right tracks because at that moment we have a lot of activities started to create the Heritage Cities program with the, at that moment, Ministry of Public Work that having the uh, space plannings director generals, and we have like breakfast meeting and then invite various ministries from pariwisata, tourism, even foreign affair, and we have discussion on every ministers having their own duties on activities of heritage cities, because heritage cities is something that we have to work together. We cannot just working alone as an NGO, as a one ministers, but with the new system of ministers, then different things, but we still going on. And then including Bapenas, we have a lot of discussion as well. And then under the coordinator Ministry of the Human Development and Culture, we try to how to coordinate and manage. And we plan to execute certain heritage cities that maybe we can have the pilot projects for, and then we can work together like a Kroyoan system, working together on those. Until last year, we discussed on this, but this year's is kind of fit out. That is what going on. Something that's very hard for us also when we have to try to make a lobby to various ministers, and but right now no even one agency in the ministers that working for the heritage cities. So it's the same actually for us, but we try, and maybe Pak Hari, you could also help us to how we can solve these problems. That's what I can say. Mungkin Pak Hari bisa langsung saja menyampaikan.
Prof. Hari, please.
Right. I think that.
Sorry.
Hi. Is
Okay.
it? Am I okay?
Yeah. Okay. Please.
Okay. Please.
Ibu Liz first.
Yes, you can also directly.
No. I can. If Ibu Sita, if you have more to say, I will.
No. Actually, I would like to ask also to Pak Hari if he has some ideas on what should we do with this, because we try, until last year we still have discussions with the coordinator Ministry of Human Development and Cultures how we can cope with this kind of situations, but it's fed out.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Sita. Or Ibu Liz first. Would you like to continue? Also give feedback.
Yeah, no, I just we have a really good system. We have a lot of professionals involved. We have academics who do a lot of work. I think part of the problem is a question of coordination of the efforts, sharing of the information, and a suspension of how do I put it? A suspension of suspicion almost, oh, where are you coming from? If you are coming from the civil society, the NGO side, what do you want out of this? We're government, we you should listen to us, in a very feudalistic kind of a paternalistic system. So there is that level. So how do you navigate that? I think we have this ability. We have the framework. We have um, efforts. Where I think it fails is when the efforts are coming from outside. So if I am an academic and I am a researcher or I am an NGO and I am not grassroots and I come in, unless I work and I have a continued track record, I have staying power, I can do it over a period of time and build that level of trust, both with the institutional players, government, and those agencies, and with the communities. Unless you can do that, how do you sustain it? And I think that that's one of the reasons why I was saying, in the way forward, if we have these cultural maps and if we use the local communities to create their own baselines, to put their stories out there, to make the information available, that's when we need to, when we get that level of input. And this is almost, you can really only do it through pilot studies and pilot projects. That's one way of getting the kind of support, because legally we have the framework. We don't necessarily have the political mindset. We don't necessarily have the awareness of the intrinsic value of heritage, not just in terms of the tourism, what benefit it has in terms of a tourist economy, because the tourist comes in from the outside. Well, what about the community itself? But if you don't have any activities, economic activities where the community can benefit, they then move somewhere else. They migrate, they move on. The younger people leave the town. So in a place like Taiping, which is designated itself at the state level as Banda Warisan, it's legally put itself forward and the state government accepted it. It is Banda Warisan Taiping, yeah, because they're very, very proud of their heritage. If you look at who the local movers are, who the players, they're either on the tourism front or they are much older generation. And then as that older generation passes on, the young people have already left the place. So while they may have some emotional attachment, some nostalgia, they have moved on because economic benefits are elsewhere. That's what they're going for. They don't have major education post secondary school, yeah, post high school, major opportunities there. So they move on, and they move out. And then you have this break and this disconnect. And so I think that we need to find ways, and cultural mapping is one way to be able to get that voice in, because heritage is not the same in all places. And that is something we must recognize.
Thank you, Bulis, for your responses. Professor Bamanghari, would you like to respond to this?
Yes, just a little bit. And thank you very much, Pusita and Police, for the response on the idea of having the support from the government. I think what has been done by Pusita and all the communities or the societies are really valuable beginning. I don't know why Pusita mentioned that it's now fading out. But as I mentioned on the chat, that we should not give up. And I think the idea is what you have also already done is that you have already even selected who is actually the leading institutions or the leading ministry, because in order to avoid any ego sektoral gitu ya, then we need to have the leading institutions to be the coordinator. And I think what you have already selected is correct, because you have already been working with the coordinating for human resource and culture, which can be the hub of all interest in doing so. And I think based on your PhD thesis, that putting all together into all the layers, because we are not only working with the sites, not only working with buildings, not only with the landscape, but we will be working with everything into a single entity, which is the city. But again, there will also be a question why we should focus only on cities, not rural areas. But in fact, that it is not only with cities, but also villages can also be part of the heritage villages. So yes, I will support Pusita on your efforts in achieving the idea of heritage city conservation, supported by legal backups. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Hari. This is very kind of you. uh, I would like also to mention in this case, actually, what should work for this, the the ones that should also have responsibility. For me, it's not just only from the ministry, from the national level, and we don't have to go to the World Heritage City or something, but the most important is how we can have the local, not just local governments, but also local people that can manage those heritage districts, heritage city, or even kabupaten regencies, and also village. The, and they, of course, they need something like the ones that given the uh, incentive, or what kind of incentive that they will receive, even just a certain small things. We don't have to go to the world class or the world heritage, but how we can have the balance on managing the heritage cities, districts, or villages. But anyway, thank you so much, Pak Hari. We can talk more on this case.
Can I just add one thing here?
Please.
In
please.
Malaysia, we have two acts. Well, you know, a series of acts. We have two different ministries, and there is a fair amount of tension sometimes. Yeah, it's below the radar, but you know, the National Heritage Act says quite specifically the minister can do X, Y, and Z. And it's very, very broad range what the minister can do to designate heritage. However, it also says if it comes to spatial land use, the minister must have the local authority, the local government, the state government must agree. So then the question is, where does the jurisdiction lie? Development plans are approved at the planning level through Local Government Act and Town and Country Planning Act. But Jabatan Warisan under the National Heritage Act can have input provided they are asked for the input. Jabatan Warisan then have this issue of, if it isn't on our register, if it's not on the daftar, then can we have an input? Should we have an input? And that becomes this big issue. So every time we run into questions on this management, how do we, who has the legal mandate, yeah, and how do we support it? It actually is where it falls between the stools. The local authority has given permission. The national, have given permission because, it's not on the register. Then civil society comes along and says, wait a minute, you can't do this because it's part of our heritage and it's local to us. It may not be a part of it. And why did the local government then make the approval without without coming back to consult? So Ibu Sita's proposal for making sure that there is a big input from community is I think critical. to the protection at any level. And there must be within the mechanisms, with the framework which already exists, a real effort to make sure that the implementation includes not just a checklist, I have done a focus group discussion, but actual involvement of. And that's why I'm very impressed with your Indonesian network of heritage cities, because it is trying, even though maybe sometimes a bit more slowly, but you are looking at a coordinated across board 50 cities network. You know, in Malaysia, we look at it one city at a time, individually. And really the only, while I have, have concerns about culture being a commodity, it's really only at the tourism level, whether it's local tourism or international tourism, where the community then, seems to be able to mobilize and say, wait a minute, these are our heritage assets. And we want to present them to the world. We want to present them to others. So that is almost where we can maybe, look at your concept of a network and look at how we can begin to gather, instead of rather having just one by one, making the sum of the whole much larger. That's just an idea.
Thank you very much, Bulis. We shall continue with the next question. It's from Ibu Diana Lisa. Ibu Diana Lisa from Universitas Lampung. She has a question to Busita concerning the implementation of heritage economy, because there is a usually conflicting aspect between culture versus economy.
Yes, this is something that we have also another cases, many issues on economic of heritage. If we talk about the heritage within heritage cities, one platform to talk among various heritages actually with economic of heritage. So we're supposed to have the same language in this case, but it will be difficult when we talk to the, for instance, the culture agency. No meaning of the economic on those, we call it principles or tupoksi, the jobs of those, because they just want to preserve. No economic point of view or how to develop more. This is different job for them. And heritage economy is actually something that we have to prepare together. And this is part of the success story of the heritage conservations happen in various places. For instance, like now, the issue of heritage conservation is still in the law, is still in the designations, not in the management. So if we are talking the management, who we will talk with them? So how we can do it is, it's very difficult. And if we talk with private sector, yes, we will talk about the economic of heritage a lot, because the heritage itself, once we make the adaptive reuse, for instance, we have to have the revenue from those. The heritage should economically managed by themselves. But right now, we still have the ideas as everything is not managed by the heritage itself, but it's subsidized. So the issue of subsidized, actually, we have to change the new paradigm. Is they have to can economically manage those heritage by themselves. This is a big issue again. Right now, we are still talking about the area of Yogyakarta, dealing with the developments of infrastructures and how the community will get the benefits. It's very difficult to bring the issue to the community because everything just beyond monument, and the concentrations are focused more to the monument itself, not to the community. The community just having the impact, not something that they can also develop, uh, involve, participating on this the development of the heritage. So the paradigm should be changed. We are not just talking culture and then this is economy. Culture development is part of the economic development as well. Donovan Rekema mentions, he has a book, 100 Conservation Actions is 100 also economic development for the community. Yeah, so this is the system should be also built in ours. Begitu Bu Diana kira-kira.
Thank you, Busita. Bu Liz, would you like to share your insights on this?
I mean, I completely agree with Sita. You can't separate the two, because the where you have a settlement and you have activity, there will be economic activity, there will be social activity, there will be cultural activity that goes on, and this activity is interlinked. It isn't isolated one from the other. And economic activity is not necessarily in the same, we don't have to look at it as how much money do you have in the bank, you know, that it's not, or how much profit do you make. It's not about profit. It is about livelihood. It is about well-being. It is about the quality of life. So I think that when you look at integration in its whole holistic form, that's really what you need to understand. You cannot survive, and heritage cannot survive if it is in isolation. It is seen in isolation. Communities cannot survive if they're seen in isolation. Culture cannot survive if it is seen in isolation. And certainly our environment is suffering, will suffer, and you know, continue to suffer and degrade if we just put everything in its own silo. And so we have an environmental expert and a cultural expert and an education expert and a traffic expert, infrastructure expert, you know, and then nobody talks to each other. And everybody has the same big goal, maybe, yeah, for a better life. But exactly, can you have that better life without your, you know, feeding, without the referencing to the past? Because how do you know what is better? And it is something that you know, more and more I recognize that the value of heritage is in its absence, when it is lost, when it has gone. That is when people go, oh, where is it? It becomes a gap. It's only recognized when it's not there, very often. And so we need to change the way in which we approach things, including the way in which we see economic development, to with this understanding. It's my bugbear.
Thank you, Ibu Liz. So the community cannot be separated from the heritage districts, or part of the that they have received from the past generation. So the community should be seen as the custodian, the active conservator of the heritage. Shall we move on to the next question from Ibu Alfi Syahriana? She would like to know, how should we start from the beginning in order to find the significance values, the cultural significance of the historic districts that should be um, uh, the historic significance of the the district, and I'm sorry, how do we know that the significance are potential to be World Heritage? Bulis, or maybe because in Malaysia you have already World Heritage cities acknowledged, Penang and Malacca, Georgetown and Malacca. Could you please share your?
Well, there is a big debate, as to World Heritage. Once, when the natural sites in 2000 were listed, Mulu and Kinabalu Park, there was already a good sense within the environmentalists and the naturalists, people involved in that, in biodiversity in the natural environment, that it wasn't obvious, it was a shoe-in. Yeah, they were important biodiversity places, and they needed to be protected, and the listing was its recognition. When Malacca and Georgetown were pursuing World Heritage listing, nobody quite knew what was going on. I mean, in terms of Malaysia, this whole business of, what do the operational guidelines say? What do they mean? What is the World Heritage Convention? And this term, outstanding universal values, was being bandied around. And so the experts were talking about, the OUVs of this place. And then everybody else was not an expert, said, what is an OUV, right? So, all right, that aside, once they got listed, and then all of a sudden the big spotlight was on them, because they were World Heritage sites internationally. There was this big spotlight, and both cities took it on, embraced it and pushed forward on it, and capitalized on it in many different ways. And the tourists who were already there came in more droves, shall we say. And so you had this maybe over capacity of visitors. So you had to meander and sort of fight through human beings, visitors, to actually appreciate it, to get to engage with the living heritage of those two cities. Once that happened, everybody else said, we want to be a World Heritage Site. Kuala Lumpur said, look at our big and beautiful buildings, they should be a World Heritage Site. Taiping said, we are the first, we have all of these such and such, and we should be a World Heritage Site. Ipoh said, everybody said we should be a World Heritage Site. Because it was seen in terms of its tourism potential, bringing in people, and your GDP being increased. And that was what it was seen as. So how do we actually even begin to understand this, and how do we actually look for it? And this is really where I think we need to have an ICOMOS, international ICOMOS Indonesia, ICOMOS Malaysia, and NGOs related to this need to actually be able to find a way to articulate and to be able to work more closely with government to say, look, if heritage is only if getting World Heritage is only because you see it as a way to increase your commodity value, your economic value on this platform, on the tourism platform, then you can still do it without World Heritage. So really it goes back to understanding and to being able to recognize what are these outstanding universal values that you're going for. And these are very, very clear. The criteria is very clear. The way in which the approach for inscription is very clear. And it is really the three keywords are outstanding, unique, outstanding, even if you're not the only, how brilliant is it on the scale? How bright is your star shining, so to speak, in terms your outstanding, what universal values, and they cannot only be local. They have to be able to engage with a much wider world. And what are these values that you want to profess? And what is the reason for your wanting to shine and to show them? Is it because they are so unique, they are so important to yourselves? Is there the evidence of it? And so it really is quite a laborious, quite a protracted process. And I think that a lot of people go for World Heritage, or in Malaysia anyway, want World Heritage listing because they think that it is, you know, the prize. It is, you know, the big trophy. Yeah. Georgetown and Malacca will probably tell you that, you know, they're having got World Heritage status. They have found themselves engaging with things that they have maybe not had to deal with when they were not World Heritage, when they were not a World Heritage site. They were, you know, the rigor, I think the rules, yeah, the guidelines, the standards that they've had to abide by have been much more rigorous because it is universal. You are talking about a world stage. You are not playing, you know, you have to play by that set of rules. So if you want that mark, then you follow that set of rules. But aspiring to the values and to being able to present that set of values because you want to ensure that you keep these values protected does not necessarily mean you need to be a World Heritage Site. It does mean that you recognize them and your community values them and you want to protect them. So I am not, you know, so not that I'm not keen on World Heritage listing, because we think it's a good thing, you know, but it isn't the be all and the end all. There are other sets of ways to approach the keeping of and the protection and the enhancement of your own as a city or as a village or as a rural environment, your own heritage in that way, and it doesn't have to be on the UNESCO World Heritage List.
Thank you, Belize.
I want to
We're
mention
talking about,
also
yes,
supporting the Lee's mentionings that
yes,
we
yes,
don't
please,
have
Belize.
we don't have to be in the list of the World
World
Heritage.
Heritage.
Yeah, because the most important is what the outstanding of our city, our village is conserved and give benefit to the local, to the people, and the heritage itself. So this is the most important. We don't have to go to the World Heritage. And the criteria, the outstanding universal value, universal is for the words. We can actually use for our criteria to mention that ours is heritage cities, but in a local level. So this is the more important than we have to proceed to the World Heritage. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so Busita, out of the 28 heritage cities that has started their pilot project by the Ministry of Public Work, there is no uh, objectives towards the listing on World Heritage sites, or
There is a Sawah Lunto already listed.
uh,
Yeah,
yes,
Sawah
I
Lunto,
think
and
Sawalunto.
this is I can see this. The most important there is the leaderships, and right now also the leadership of our colleagues there, Pak Kino. I don't know, maybe he is here too. There's a leadership to continue to sustain the conservations and I think to enforce those cities as a World Heritage is very, very important. But I don't think all cities or other cities can also do the same thing. We can see from the leaderships also from those.
Okay, thank you
Can I
very
just
much.
interject? Actually, this is such an important point that Ibu Sita has raised. You need to have direction, you need to have a dynamic leadership, and you need to have, because without that, you know, people wander off in many different directions. There's many, you know, there's no pulling together. And looking at World Heritage, looking at the values of the place, it does not mean that if you're not a World Heritage Site, you have no values. It doesn't mean that. It means that, you know, the values are for yourself. And maybe in some cases, you want to share it with the world. And in some cases, The only way to protect it is not to share it with the world. And that is, I think, something that we should all think about as well. Because sometimes sharing it with the world um, would speed up or would encourage its degradation or its loss. It's a thought.
Yeah. So many thoughts to concerning the risk of the also the listing of World Heritage sites. Apart from the finding the outstanding universal values that heritage city has. Okay, thank you, Bu Liz and Bu Sita. And the next question is from Ibu Eti from Culture Heritage Experts of Bandung, tim ahli cagar budaya Kota Bandung. Um, could you please explain about the role of the non-governmental stakeholders, CBOs and NGOs? Bu Sita or Bu Liz?
Ibu Eti, is this means on how we go nominate to designate it as a word heritage city or just a national heritage cities, or the role in the management that we can become to enforce also the management of this, or even they can also to make a campaign on get the get the or support the community and also the local governments to work together to have this heritage cities conserved. So I still don't know which one is your point or the whole aspect. If the whole aspect is very important, but once again, is based on the leadership on those NGO itself. We have to really try to advocate. If, for instance, like the current conditions, there are a lot of problems on this case. We have to fight. We have to, yeah, this is our roles to make it happen, to make it conserve, and then how we can be a guard of the conservation if there's already listed. But like I mentioned before, our objective is not just to become designated or listed, but it's for the whole life, how it can be properly managed, how can they become or make the quality of life of the local to the balance of the days and get more benefit. And of course, it will generate income also for the community, not for the tourists, but for the community. This is our role for the NGOs.
Yes. Thank you, Bu Sita. Bu Liz, would you like to add something?
Nothing really to add because
Okay.
Sita's
Okay.
absolutely right. It's
Okay.
the NGOs are there to act as a voice, to be a way for people to gather and to mobilize, for communities to be able to speak up and out. And there are, there are NGOs that are more confrontational, and there are NGOs that work more quietly. And, we're not only talking about cultural NGOs, education is really important. We're talking about, a whole range of players, researchers, and, because without that actual content, without that actual real information, sometimes, we make decisions which are not sound. So the role of the NGO is to help ensure that at all levels and to work in partnership, because it's not just a one-way system, it's a two-way system. And it's both up and, bottom up and top down, because it has to be a holistic approach. And so NGOs also have to learn to cooperate with government, and government also has to learn to cooperate with NGOs. I think that then becomes, and this goes back to Sita's point about leadership. If you have good leadership and leadership that wants a good quality of life, a good outcome whatever, and however that's interpreted, to protect and to retain these values and to enhance these values that we feel are very important for our community. That's the way to do it.
Thank you, Bulis. So Ibu Sita and Bulis highlighted the importance of leadership of heritage cities, and also the political will or political mindset. And then the NGOs, the role of NGOs is concerning the advocacy on proper management towards the benefit of the local communities, and also to build network and partnership between all stakeholders. Thank you, Busita and Bulis. And then the next question is from Bapak. I'm so sorry. Bapak Tony Kunto from Department of Architecture. To both speakers, the concept of the enforcement of heritage areas that have been established by the government. Sometimes the problems lies at the technical aspect, the implementation or practice, which are so different due to the inconsistencies in existing data information, due to the problems, the conflicting conflicting interest. How to anticipate this situation? How to deal with these issues or challenges? Or Busita and
Yes.
Bulis, would you like to?
Okay. Heritage is various. We have so many varieties of heritage. It can be already have a legal backup. For instance, like the monuments, we have the Undang-Undang Cagar Budaya. For the natural, we have some legal backup. Pemajuan kebudayaan for intangible heritage, yes. But once this is like a weaving of and become the heritage cities, we don't have the legal backup. So how we can enforce them, this is very, very difficult in this kind of conditions. So the problem is not only the technical aspect, but the regulations on the weaving of the culture, natural, tangible, intangible heritage. We don't have this. If we have, maybe we have from the Tata Ruang, the space planning law. We have from the environmental law. But how is we can enforce the relations to the quality of heritage itself, and then the impact to the community? This is our issue right now.
Thank you, Busita. Bulis?
Actually, data is something that is we need to continue on. Yeah, you don't do just one baseline and then you don't revisit. You don't keep building on what you already have. And when I was talking about the baseline cultural map, that's really where we start. But it means that once we have the map, we need to continually improve it and update it. And that really is that really is key, I think, to being able to understand what we have, what our assets are, and what impacts there are when there are changes, when things develop, when there's new developments, new policies. The COVID-19 situation, it changed the world. Really, it didn't just change our individual lives. It changed the way in which we approach. If we were doing this talk if we were doing this as a forum I would be in Jogja, yeah. It would be different, in front of this audience. I wouldn't be talking to my computer. So things change, and we need to be able to, I think, technically actually embrace this information and to be able to put it out there and to be able to share it. And I think it's really important that universities get involved and that universities share their information and governments share the information. It should be in the public domain. It isn't. Information shared is information which empowers everyone. When you keep it to yourself, it doesn't empower people. And so when we are talking about enforcement, we need to have this information. And this information and this data is going to help us implement and to be able to understand better what we have and to be able to make better decisions. So I think that for me is the way in which we need to move if we want to protect our, if heritage is important to us, to our communities, and that's really, as professionals involved in the advocacy, involved in the research and the study, that's something that we really need to really get our teeth into and make sure that we are able to share it. I think that to me is really important, so that it's not, don't challenge me and say my information is wrong, update my information. That's really what I want. Yeah, and really this is how we can then anticipate how we, whether government and non-government can work together.
Thank you very much, Ibu Sita and Ibu Liz. So I would like to highlight that that data and information must be a public domain, as has been said by Ibu Liz, and that empower people. And also, Busita has have already mentioned on her presentation about the second instruments of heritage city management concerning the information education, public education on heritage cities. And the next question from Pak Aditya from Badan Pelestarian Arsitektur, Indonesian Institute of Architects, to Busita. Problem di Indonesia kurang regulasi berlapis, dan bila ada law enforcement masih kurang baik dari masyarakat maupun Pemkot atau Pemprov. Would you like to respond on that, Busita?
Yeah, that is the conditions. And I think what we have to do is, from the community, enforcement is supposed to come from us, from the local community, from this. Yeah, but this is the conditions that we have. It's very difficult, especially for instance, like when we working together also on the establishments of the law number 11 and 2010s. Many of our ideas actually is very difficult to be accepted by the committee at the moment. We work already with this, but a lot of things that the different notion, different understanding, and different platform, especially at that's why in the Indonesian Heritage Trust, we try to make an agreement among us through the charter, making the developing the regulations through the law, the rule, and government's rule, for instance, is quite tough. And I think is I'm give up about this one, but not for the charter, not for the activities, but for going to the legal aspect. This is really give up.
I was about to shock. I was shocked if Busita give up the the movement, her activities. Okay, unfortunately not. And then thank you, Busita, and to Bulis. He also asked a question concerning whether is it right or not that Penang and Malacca looks for more tourists. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, Is that one of their directions and strategies? Yes, or yes, yes, you're correct. Um, Malacca has set itself a target, yeah, to get X number of million visitors in a very small core zone, yeah. And the core zone, I think, in Georgetown is about 4 times as large. But the number of visitors, I think that Malacca wanted, that was that was their strategy, to keep the site viable, to keep an economic growth there, was using a tourism strategy. So yes, that is very true. It's not a question of having or not having tourists. It really is a question of then how do you manage when you have the tourists? What do they do? How do they, how is the site interpreted for them? What do they get? What value do they get? And understanding the values on which, the outstanding universal values on which the site was inscribed. So if we really only have the outstanding universal values, or it's only seen as uh, food, or coming and buying trinkets, then that doesn't actually express the living heritage for which was, the criteria on which the site was inscribed. So that's something that it's not a question of having or not having tourists. It's a question of what do you provide in terms of the interpretation for tourists when they come, for visitors. They can be local or foreign. And how do they then have a better understanding and a better appreciation of these OUVs for which you were inscribed? I think that really is key and critical. So yes, they have gone through, both Georgetown and Malacca have gone through, they wax and wane over, the number of tourists who come, is it a good thing or isn't it a good thing? So yes, there is good and bad to it. But, where is the local community in it, and what do they, have they been pushed out because of new businesses that have come in that cater for the tourists? And this management in Malaysia is done through an RKK, a special area plan, which has a legislative function. But within that, it is very spatial. It remains very physical. The special area plan, because it's under this particular act, remains very physical. So it tells you what you can do in certain areas, what kinds of activities, but it doesn't actually program it, and it doesn't actually manage the way in which the site is interpreted, is seen, is delivered, shall we say, to the visitor. So there are two sides to the tourists. They're not all bad, but they do need to be managed. And what we look for, and this is part of the research that I'm working with somebody on, is look at the rate of change. How there will be change. What is the rate of it? How fast is it going? What has happened, and what is the nature of the change? Who's there? What businesses have disappeared, or have been enhanced? In Malaysia, Georgetown and Malacca, there's this whole thing about uh, they're photo ops, yeah, Instagrammable moments. So we have lots of things, like we have food, lots of food, and which is hugely promoted, and we have a background, a backdrop, which tells you part of your story, but it is only seen as a backdrop. If I take a picture, do I understand the place better? And that really is something that needs to be tackled, I think, by all levels, society, the community, and government.
Thank you, Bulis. And then this one is not actually a question, but Pa Arya Abieta would like to share with all of us from the chat that a World Heritage is a promise from the authority to the world, and to keep their heritage in protection in a world-class standard, and not to get tourists to come. And then from a question from thank you, Pa Arya, for sharing with us. I think he's an he's an activist in Heritage Conservation Network. Uh, and then from Bapak Frankie Pondaah, he would like to know how the region or village um, work together to develop planning in combination with heritage and local wisdom. Could the speakers share the method or advise the method and application to to do the heritage conservation?
I will try to also to respond on this. I
Please,
would like
Busita.
to, yes, I would like to show a simple things in a village called Imogiri. This is very interesting place where the royal family buried on the hill in Imogiri and become the royal cemetery over there, and surrounded by the villages that have the local wisdom on making the batik painting. And because there is market for the royal family as well as the abdi dalam, the royal servants, and also the Yogyakarta peoples. And with this, they can develop their own activities. They can have the good welfare. And because of the earthquake, actually it was collapsed. But with the support of various parties, right now they are now is getting more and better situations. And the most important that previously they were only a worker as making the batik, but right now they also become the teachers. A lot of students, a lot of people come to that village and they learn how to make the batiks. And later on, a lot of them would like to stay on those villages. And the local tried to develop the homestay for them. And the homestays should they agree, they make an agreement by themselves that all the homestay is supposed to be the local types of houses like limasan or kampung. So this kind of movement by the local, although many parties also support them, but they need support, they need a views perspective from various people. But the way of this is actually they combine a lot of things. So the planning itself on those area, on village planning, is not just about spatial, it's not just about the buildings, but also the combinations of those uh, intangible cultural heritage that they have. And the importance of the batik itself is supposed to, they have to also can develop themselves. For instance, the materials of the fabrics from the cotton, for instance, or also the natural dye. They can also plan by themselves for that. So balancing of this can also create a better or peaceful village. And important, this is can become the sustainable uh, development goals that we will proceed in 2030 through this kind of things. The local wisdom can bring them to the future development of their own cities or own village. That's my views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Busita. Bulis, Ibulis, would you like to?
Um, just moving on then from what Ibusita has been saying,
Mhm.
local wisdom. It is about, if you have the wisdom and you have the knowledge and you have your pride in your knowledge, and the outsider respects that, even if it is a traditional knowledge and it's not new knowledge or it's not the contemporary system, yeah, that is something which is valuable, then at the local and the regional level, at the village level, that is something to be pushed forward. I'll give you two just different scenarios. One is in Langkawi, which is this island, which is a geopark. Yeah? If you go to the tourism office and you go to the state, they will say, oh, there's no culture in Langkawi. Langkawi doesn't have any culture. It's got beaches, it's got mountain, it's got the geopark, but it doesn't have culture, whatever they interpret as culture. And then you actually go into, let's say, a fishing, because it's an island, a lot of fishing villages, and you talk to, people, and that their way of fishing. So, you have, for example, what do they call it? The fish whisperers, and the traditional fishing techniques to find and locate shoals of fish, for example, that's there. Now, it's not something that is seen. You use sonar, you use radar, you use trawlers nowadays, right? But this is much more sustainable because they actually are able to harvest for their needs, not commercial, yes, and make a living out of it, but not to rape, not to over harvest, because they know that their place has a limit. There is a capacity, and you cannot, and so overfishing will kill their livelihood. So it is really trying at the village level. You also need to have being able to speak out, yeah, and to say this is what we want and this is what we need. So leadership, it goes back to the point about leadership. It goes back to the point about who are your community leaders and what do you want out of it. So I think that's something that we really need to be able to understand. So if you can share through your homestay, if you can share this knowledge, more people will then get, oh, this is a good way, it's different. Maybe it's not something we do, but we respect what you have. Even if it is not our way, we respect that it is your way. And that is the only way to encourage, I think, this building of trust and this bridging.
I'm so sorry. I did. It's still on mute. Thank you very much, Bulis and Busita. So, because of time constraints, this would be the last question from our webinar today, from Pak Iftironi. I'm so sorry, Pak Iftironi, that I unintentionally skip your question. It's about the. I'm so sorry. It's about the pandemic situation we are facing now. He would like to hear from both speakers. Are there any impacts of this global pandemic, to the cities, especially in case of heritage cities in Malaysia and Indonesia? Pak Iftironi from Department of Architecture, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Would you like to begin, Bulis or Busita? Please.
Okay, I'll just begin by just saying, I think the pandemic has made, yes, there has been an impact because the visitor numbers have gone down, obviously, because of the restrictions, because of the movement controls. So there have been businesses that have gone out, but people are now beginning to say, okay, how do we manage, how do we promote, how do we sustain ourselves using other means than having physical people visit? So I think it's helped cities and businesses become just more innovative, in order to survive. But if you have a product that you believe in, that that has great cultural value, it shouldn't just be lost. So how do we create an economy or an economic sustainability, financial sustainability, shall we say, even if we don't have visitors. I am on an advisory panel, an expert advisory panel for Cendana. Cendana is it's funded by government, but it is a cultural economy. We give grants and programs related to developing and enhancing the cultural economy in Malaysia. And one of the first things we did as soon as the lockdown happened was we called a meeting of the expert panel, and we said, look, we have to be able to respond to this, because the first people who are going to be really affected are people working in the cultural arena. Places are closed. Where they got their revenue, their income from, is no longer available to them. So how do we support them? And, are we a welfare organization, which we're not? So how do we give them a means and opportunity to find other ways to deliver and create, continue to create, be creative in whatever cultural milieu they are working in that sphere, and yet, retain their integrity, their professional integrity, but be able to then build on, it's not a handout. So how do we do that? And I think we've all really had to very quickly and spontaneously do this at all levels of society. Education, I mean, you're teaching online now, students are just, we are on Zoom, yeah? And so our response, I think, is going to be something which will continue to resonate for a long time. And with the heritage cities, they are really needing to address and move away from this dependency on the mass tourists to the individual, more concerned or more concerted visitor, and then the management of sites. But physically, I think the buildings and the cities got a bit of breathing space. But the question is, how do they regenerate? How do they rejuvenate? And that we will need to see. I mean, that's in the future. This is something to be watched out for.
Thank you, Bu Liz. Bu Sita, would you like to add something concerning
Yeah,
this?
actually, I agree with what Liz also mentions in this case. And I don't want to talk more about the negative things, but there are a lot of opportunity for us yet. We have to do a lot of things, and how we can then rethink what is actually a proper way of balancing cultures and natures. And right now we try to promote what is called the Saujana cultural landscapes. So this is something that we have to have a balance, because traditionally the local wisdoms that, for instance, like Sumatra, the West Sumatra, alam takambang jadi guru. The nature has become our teachers for our cultures. So we have to rethink what it's supposed to have. Like this, I always show this bamboo in my gardens. So 20 years or 30 years ago, many bamboo trees all over Yogyakarta were cut because it's make it dirty. Everything is dirty because of the leaves. But actually, bamboo, they have a lot of potential things, the local wisdoms, especially along the river. So now we understand more because of 2006, when we need bamboo, we have to import from other places to Yogyakarta because we only have a few of bamboos to be cut. So this is what we have to do now. Pandemics is the way we have to revisit it, our view, our thoughts, and also our method. And I agree, we have to prepare for the new adaptations for our life. That actually in our local wisdom.
Yes,
Very beautiful indeed.
That's definitely about traditional
Yes.
sustainability, not the interjection where this word sustainability under the UN, and under
Yeah,
SDGs is imposed on
Yes.
us, and that is because we've lost that, right? So now we have to find it by adding this thing called the SDG onto our lives. But traditionally, you look at
We
any
have, yeah,
community,
traditionally
we have
we
it.
have.
So let's go back to it. Let's, so this is an
Yes.
opportunity for us in the
Yes.
heritage, work, in our heritage, cultural heritage work. In
Exactly.
our villages, our places, our cultural landscapes. This is the opportunity. And we should really not just embrace it, but take it. It's ours. It's our time.
Thank you very much, Ibu Sita and Ibu Liz, for remarkable presentation and explanation.
And I would like also to thank
Oh, okay.
all participants because a lot of insights also for me. And we have to work together. Thank
Yes,
you.
indeed.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for all the participants. So to conclude, not to try to conclude, but I would like to highlight that the heritage city management or heritage conservation and management are our responsibility. So it takes all level of societies to do proper management and conservation. And balanced heritage management should be one of the critical points to achieve. Thank you very much once again for all the speakers for the remarkable presentation. Hopefully in the future, we would like, Department of Architecture would be able to invite or to continue our discussion concerning the management of heritage cities in Southeast Asia in the after this with also other speakers and for those who would like to catch up with our session today, you can visit our YouTube channel Architecture UII. Just type Architecture UII and you will be directed to our channel. Thank you very much once again, and thank you very much for all the participants. We look forward to having you again in this kind of online meeting. Wabillahi taufik to to close the meeting. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wabillahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih.
Terima
Terima kasih.
kasih. And have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah, thank you,
So,
Bulis.
Alice, enjoy your KL.
And you enjoy your Jogja. We'll see you
Yes.
virtually or in person.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much.